So no, I wish it had just been a tumultuous week. It's really been a tumultuous year.
What if I told you America's top disease agency just turned into a political battlefield? What if the very people sworn to protect your life from the next pandemic were silenced, sidelined, or shoved out the door? Imagine the CDC director fired in less than a month, whistleblowers walking out in protest, and scientists clapping their leaders goodbye like soldiers leaving a lost war. This is happening only in America. Now the question is simple, but terrifying. Has Donald Trump turned the CDC into a weapon against science itself? Let's find out. It all began when Susan Monarez, the newly appointed CDC director, was forced out barely a month into her role. Her removal wasn't about performance, it was about politics. Within weeks, the agency became the stage for a power struggle where science lost to ideology. Monarez's firing sent shockwaves through the public health community, raising fears that the CDC was no longer independent, but an arm of political agendas.
First on the firing of the CDC director,
Sure.
Who will replace her? And then also, overnight the White House said that she did not align with the president's agenda. Dr. Monarez's attorneys say that she refused to rubber stamp unscientific, reckless directives and fired dedicated health experts. What specifically did she do wrong?
Look, what I will say about this individual is that her lawyer's statement made it abundantly clear themselves that she was not aligned with the president's mission to make America healthy again. And the secretary asked her to resign. She said she would, and then she said she wouldn't, so the president fired her, which he has every right to do. It was President Trump who was overwhelmingly reelected on November 5th. This woman has never received a vote in her life, and the president has the authority to fire those who are not aligned with his mission. A new replacement will be announced by either the president or the secretary very soon, and the president and Secretary Kennedy are committed to restoring trust and transparency and credibility to the CDC by ensuring their leadership and their decisions are more public-facing, more accountable, strengthening our public health system, and restoring it to its core mission of protecting Americans from communicable diseases, investing in innovation to prevent, detect, and respond to future threats. That's the mission of the CDC, and we're going to make sure that folks that are in positions of leadership there are aligned with that mission.
This wasn't just an internal shakeup. It was a warning sign that something far bigger was coming. Then came the voice that could not be silenced. Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis, respected across the health world, resigned with a letter that tore into the Trump administration and RFK Jr.'s meddling. He accused leadership of burying science, ignoring vulnerable populations, and using the CDC as a political weapon.
I think that what really happened is that, this has been a death by 1,000 cuts for me. But I really got to the tipping point when it became clear that the committee that is responsible for making recommendations to the director of CDC on vaccine policy has become completely compromised, and that the firewall that needs to exist between science and ideology is breaking down. When that happens, CDC science gets tainted by ideology, and that means the American people's vaccine policy will be tainted by ideology and not be driven by science. Compounded by Dr. Monarez being asked to step down or resigning, whichever happened, that meant that we had no scientific leadership to be a diplomat into that space to make sure that that firewall could stay. I hit my tipping point. I'm a doctor. First, do no harm. I was only going to be able to do harm if I stayed.
His words weren't just about quitting a job. They were a siren warning that public health itself was collapsing under pressure. He made clear that the CDC was in crisis and Americans needed to wake up. And many agree with him. Take a look.
It seems like a dream realized for Secretary Kennedy. For a decade, he has been saying that he wants to dismantle CDC. Specifically, he has called CDC scientists Nazis. He has said that they abuse children like the Catholic Church priests abuse children. He has called them evil. Every name in the book, he has villainized these people. And after the shooting in August at CDC headquarters, he, said, my heart's with you, but couched a lot of his language. Now, alternately, the people who showed up at that meeting, at this all-hands meeting, was Susan Monarez and 3 of the people that also quit today, the center directors that quit today. So these are the people that were really holding the CDC together. These are the people that all of the scientists said, as long as these folks are still there, I can work. And I've been on the phone with a dozen people at the CDC right now, and they've told me things like, who is going to want to work at the CDC now? They said they don't trust the information that's going to come out of them, and they don't feel like there's any bulwark left. Someone said to me, there's no one left. And this feels like a very, very important moment where Kennedy has seemingly gotten rid of any limits on his power and his anti-vaccine obsession.
But to walk out, Daskalakis wasn't alone. 4 other senior CDC leaders walked out in solidarity. Deborah Howry, Daniel Jernigan, and Jennifer Layden among them. What happened next was extraordinary. Staff gathered outside headquarters to clap their colleagues out, a silent but powerful protest against the hijacking of their institution. The images of scientists cheering their departing leaders looked less like a farewell and more like a funeral for truth in public health. At that moment, the world saw a rebellion within the CDC itself.
I've been 30 years here. Some of you have been with me those whole 30 years. And what makes us great at CDC is following the science. So let's get the politics out of public health. Let's get back to the objectivity and let the science lead us, because that's how we get to the best decisions for public health.
Into the storm stepped Jim O'Neill, named as interim director. But instead of calming the waters, his appointment sparked new controversy. O'Neill had ties to billionaire Peter Thiel and was known more for Silicon Valley experiments than public health expertise. For many inside the CDC, his arrival symbolized a complete takeover. Outsiders running science, guided by politics and profit, not evidence. If Monterez's ousting was the spark, O'Neill's installation was gasoline poured onto the fire.
He relayed a conversation she had had with Secretary Kennedy. He told her directly that he wanted her to fire her leadership team and that he wanted her to agree to approve any recommendations that came out of the newly constructed Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. She said she would only approve recommendations that were based on the best science and best evidence. She was told to resign and she refused and said that she expected to be fired pretty soon.
There's a lot of trouble at CDC, and it's going to require getting rid of some people over the long term. I would say this, that first of all, I will confirm that we let go Susan Menares yesterday. I'm not going to talk about personnel issues, but the CDC is an agency that is very troubled for a very long time, and anybody who lived through the COVID pandemic and saw all of these bizarre recommendations that were not science-based, all the misinformation, understands that the CDC has on its website today that among the top 10 medical innovations, greatest medical accomplishments in history was abortion. This is one of the greatest medical accomplishments because it keeps small families. Go to the website, look at it. Fluoridation, giving kids a toxin, and vaccines. So there's a lot of trouble at CDC, and it's going to require getting rid of some people over the long term in order for us to change the institutional culture and bring back pride and self-esteem and make that agency the stellar agency that it's always been. I'm very confident in the political staff that we have down there now that they're going to be able to accomplish that and ensure the competent functionality of that agency.
The resignations didn't just rattle the CDC, they shook the entire public health field. 9 former CDC directors, spanning both Republican and Democratic administrations, did something unprecedented. They wrote a joint public letter condemning the Trump-Kennedy agenda. They warned that dismantling the CDC's independence would endanger millions, weaken vaccine programs, and erase decades of progress. When voices that once led America through pandemics speak out in unison, it means the system is teetering. And they all agreed the CDC was in real trouble.
Yeah, so a lot of times they'll say that CDC is very insular and not transparent. I would argue that CDC scientists are rigorous, extremely collaborative, and have been transparent. We put our data on the website. We have dashboards, extensive reviews that we open for public comment. And I came from outside about 10 years ago from academia. I can tell you that the CDC scientists are top-notch and excellent. What we would actually have preferred was to have more interactions with the secretary. My senior leaders never were able to brief the secretary, our scientists, on any of these issues. So I'm very concerned. We have the highest number of measles cases in over 30 years, and vaccines can prevent measles. But if you have somebody not supporting the vaccine and giving misinformation about it, people are less likely to get vaccinated and trust the science. Hence, we have continued outbreaks, and we've had pediatric deaths in measles. That is unprecedented and just disastrous. That should not be happening. It's heartbreaking.
Do you believe that there is a direct correlation between RFK's longstanding vaccine skepticism and the messages he's trumpeted and the declining vaccination rates and cases ticking up like the measles?
I do think so. I think if people don't have trust in the science or trust in vaccines, which happens when you have misinformation, people are less likely to get vaccines. They want to have confidence in what they get. And that's what we were trying to do at CDC through, talking with communities, providing science and data, working through pediatricians. So this is really the bread and butter of public health. And we need leadership that supports that.
This isn't just about resignations or a leadership shuffle. It's about trust. If people no longer believe the CDC speaks for science, the consequences ripple far beyond Washington into pharmacies, hospitals, and households across America. Vaccine access is disrupted, misinformation spreads, and ordinary people are left confused about what to believe. The whistleblowers risked everything to sound the alarm. The question now is whether the public will listen or whether America will let politics finally bury science for good.
He said that RFK Jr. reassured him that he would lean on evidence-based science. But really, Dr. Sloan,
what? I mean, I know this was several months ago, but this sort of sets the stage of how we got here, right? That's what we're talking about, is that the irony of it all, that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. built his whole reputation on casting what doubts on vaccines. He even questioned their safety. He amplified the conspiracy theorists across America. And for decades, he sowed the distrust, the very tools that kept our community safe. But yet, at the most pivotal moment in history for Americans, the senator decided to take him at his word, right? Like, over decades of consensus from the CDC's own advisory committee of immunization practices, who, by the way, are now gone.
I mean, this is how fragile our system can be, right? Public health policy, something that should be grounded in data and evidence, has come down to a single senator's comfort with political reassurance. I mean, one man's "I'll trust you this time" has outweighed the voices of scientists who have spent their careers protecting lives.
Careers. I mean, consequences are massive at this point. Lives are on the line. And so instead of the CDC driving the conversation for historical prevalence and precedents, politics are now driving everything. And so instead of experts who have done the research and have put the time and the hours and the years in of science guiding what vaccines should be covered, the political theater has now taken over the stage, and we are in for big trouble.
And and here's the bitter truth, and this is something that we've been saying basically during this entire presidency.
Yeah.
When politics replaces science, it isn't just a philosophical debate. This isn't, apples or oranges. It really, this sets the stage for resignations at the top, for confusion in the states, and even financial strain for families who can't afford to pay for vaccines out of pocket.
Yeah, but we know this was all part of the scheme of Project 2025, from Cassidy's decisive vote that didn't just elevate RFK Jr. To the HHS head. It opened the door for the crisis that we're in now, 8 months later, you guys.
And so here we are. The CDC, once the world's gold standard for science, is now gutted by politics, abandoned by its leaders, and distrusted by the very people it was built to serve. Resignations, whistleblowers, and warnings from past directors aren't just headlines, they're alarm bells. We are standing in the middle of a public health crisis, not because of a virus, but because of a system that chose power over truth. The scientists have done their part. They've risked their careers to warn us. The question is, will we listen, or will we let this crisis consume us all? Let us know in the comments section what needs to be done to stop this.